Hi everybody, my name is Lori Arian. I'm the founder and executive director of FOA Families of Addicts, and I'm here today with Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor, really talking about her key points and new policies and incentives, and really we just wanted to have a conversation about those and really kind of what's going on in this arena and the part that I play. And so just so all of you guys know, I started FOA in October of 2013. We just celebrated our 4th birthday last night of weekly meetings. So we've had weekly meetings every Wednesday in Dayton since then. And last night we had 95 people. So we've reached touching over 10,000 people since we started. So that's not unduplicated, but I feel like anyone who's coming back is a good thing.
Yeah.
So we're currently in 5 counties. We're in Montgomery, Miami, I'm going to mess this up, Miami, Darke, Shelby, and Clark, and soon to be Van Wert.
Okay.
And we've got probably another 6 counties that have asked about FOA and want FOA in their community. So what we're doing is working, and what we've done is we've taken our recovery people and people still struggling at times, and our families, and put them together. And when you take those 2 segments together, the intersection is respect.
Mm-hmm.
From that respect, waterfalls out all kinds of things like understanding and education and all of those things. And I've created a culture because of we're transparent, we're not anonymous, and we're showing people what we're doing, and we're letting people know we're here for you. So they know that we're here. And by combining those 2 things, like I said, I've developed this culture of really compassionate families and people in recovery who are so willing to help each other. And every year we do a rally. So this last year we had over 2,000 people at our rally at Courthouse Square. And that's all filled with 50 resources. We're like a hub of resource information. We've developed so many relationships with so many different kinds of people that we have 50 of them there, and so people can access those. We have speakers, and we have a wonderful, as eco-friendly or eco-friendly as we can, balloon launch. And so it's just, we've just created a really positive culture around something that can be so negative. And so I'm so happy to talk to you today and have your attention to this.
So what's interesting is it's been a really good day, and I've always appreciated we've met before. We did a panel together. I had a conversation earlier with some other individuals that are working in this space, volunteering in this space. Yeah. And what my proposal really looks to do is to build on the success that we've made, or that we've had, but to capitalize on what you guys are doing in community. I am a strong believer, and always have been, that government's not the solution, but government has a role to play in the solution. And then specifically, we were just talking about what would this mean for you, your organization. Right. And I look at my proposal, where I'm committed to working with the legislature and passing a bond initiative, a 10-year up to $1 billion bond issue that will help build out the infrastructure that we need to have comprehensive treatment across the entire spectrum. Excuse me, but it's building on what you've already done in the community, because through addiction, because of addiction or addiction, you need community to be a part of the solution, because that's where you're going to get your best success. Right. And so through the bond initiative, what I would anticipate doing is being able to, whether it's provide seed, whether it's to provide seed money for capital improvements or construction of facilities, or to help with operating expenses for a short period of time until you as an entity could get up and running and be independent on your own. And I really imagine, again, it's the private sector, it's the communities that come forward with the right solutions and the solutions that work best. And so we would be incenting market-based solutions that are community-driven, both in the not-for-profit world as far and as for-profit, but building out the entire continuum of the treatment that we need.
Well, I love to hear you say that, because you're totally right. It is not, it's one entity is not going to be able to figure this out or really make a huge impact. It really involves all of us coming together. And I do know that a lot of our systems are completely stressed. You know, we know the system needs work. However, the system is suffering from what they're calling compassion fatigue. And that's due to undercapacity and really being hit over and over and over again with the same thing. And also, there's, you know, FOA is doing tremendous work. We're not the only ones. There's a lot of us that are really on the ground, you know, boots on the ground, helping people get into treatment, helping families, and it becomes a 24/7 job for us. And I didn't know that when I started this. I had no idea that we would take off to this level. I did want it to be a national, I figured it could be a national organization, but I didn't know that when I started it. Well, we can be.
Right.
But part of it is the mindset needs to change, that you know as well as I do, not all the money in the world. We could have the Taj Mahal of rehabs, and we can keep the door open and welcoming, and one of those times hopefully it's going to stick.
Right.
So we set it all up in front of them. However, during that process of, you know, what do we want to say, you know, the stages of change and all of that, the readiness for change, the families are still there.
That's right.
And you know this firsthand.
Yes.
Right? So the families are there, and I am a firm believer, and I'm looking for the evidence based on this, that when we support, educate, provide hope to our family members, there is a waterfall effect that goes to the rest of the family. That includes the children that are most likely being cared for either by a person in recovery or the parents or friends of that person. And so even if you were to provide FOA and organizations like us some capacity building dollars, I feel like that's low-hanging fruit almost, because it has such a huge trickle effect. And I don't hear a whole lot of people talking about this value that we're bringing to our community on the ground.
I absolutely agree with you, could not agree more. I just think about my own personal situation with my two sons who are both living in recovery, and I've told the story in front of you, so you know it. But one thing my family has done is we've been very fortunate to understand that there is a family impact, but there's also not only the impact, how do we as a family deal with the stress and the trauma of what we've been through the last 5 or 6 years, whether it was living in the throes of addiction, it was 2 overdoses, my older son overdosing twice, just the trauma that we have been through as a family, and have done a lot of emotional therapy to understand what that trauma looks like, and to understand how to interact with each other, living in, you know, with my two sons living in a sober environment. So I think about what you're doing, dealing with that piece of it with families, but also one of the things that we will roll out in the education plan is that I had a consultant say to me in the last couple of weeks that we could potentially be living with 3 generations of trauma. And so I will commit to devoting resources in our schools, trauma counselors, addiction counselors, so that we can understand that kids living today in this addiction crisis, whether, again, you've said they're living with a parent who is an addict, they're living with a parent in recovery, they're a baby that was born to an addicted mother,
or their parent overdosed and is not around anymore.
Exactly.
You know,
overdosed and is not around,
right.
Or is in prison. Being raised in a foster care setting. I mean, we're going to have to deal with this. And I think, again, when I think about a state solution, really my state solution is to incent and encourage what's happening locally. And your family is absolutely a critical part of the future success for this addiction crisis in Ohio. And it's what you're doing here on the ground and bringing that family together.
Yeah. And I feel like, too, that there's, even in this piece, there are different players. There is therapy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If your therapist doesn't know what this does to families, I don't think they can adequately help sometimes. And so there is value, and I'm going to call what we're doing peer-based. I'm a Ohio certified peer supporter, But I'm telling you, not everyone who is helping today that is making a huge impact is certified in any way. We are sharing our lived experience, and we are able to help that way. So somehow organizations need to be vetted to as how they're performing and what they're doing, because to make an initiative to where everybody needs to be like a clinical professional
Right.
to help is really defeating what's already working.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely something
Right.
we should look at. I hadn't even thought about what that piece of it until you just said it, because part of what I'm anticipating doing with the proceeds from the bond issue is to help encourage individuals to get involved in this space from a professional perspective, and understanding that individuals who want to become therapists, some of the regulations or requirements around the training that they need, and the fact that they have to work with another therapist for a period of time and essentially not be paid or paid very, very little.
Yeah.
And then they incur debt, or they have incurred college debt. And I think we have to incentivize the professionals to work in this space. But I love what you just said about looking at how we can bring us,
Right.
you
well,
and me,
and
into
here's the
this
thing:
space.
like you know, just like you, we need to have a staff that is programming and operating and doing these things. But however, you have a whole bunch of people out here that are more than willing to help. And I'm going to ask you, how many people, since you've disclosed your situation, have come to you and said, I have this problem, what do you think I should do?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you have. And you, because you have a lived experience, you're able to give them some sense of peace and some sense of, hey, you know, you're not alone, and offer them some type of advice based on your own. That's what's happening all over. And like I said, we now have a little army of people doing this, but we need to now rein that in and develop it out.
Yeah.
And so that's the piece that if you understand it, you've heard it, and those of us really are hoping for support in this area, because it has taken over my life as well as my family's life, and we're helping so many people. So on that respect, it's rewarding and it's worth it, because people are being helped. But we need help, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I absolutely agree, and I hear what you're saying, and I think absolutely we need to, as a state, we need to support or incent what works. And you are right. There's nothing like your lived experience to be able to provide guidance, to provide hope, to be able to give answer questions.
Yeah.
What does it look
And
like?
sometimes just be there. I mean, sometimes people reach out first to someone that they trust that's not part of the system.
Right.
For one reason or another. And so it's a really vital, crucial piece. And really the only way to explain it is that those of us that are in it, it takes us over. It's working, and we need help.
Yeah.
But to move off of that for a minute, I wanted to talk a little bit about how your emphasis on creating and educating on non-narcotic pain solutions, I feel, is huge. And I'm not sure how educated, and maybe you guys can comment, I can't see what's going on with all of that, but comment on how we feel the mainstream community is aware that things like Vicodin and Percocet in your cabinets are a potential for a person to start their journey there. I know I didn't. When I started this, I had no idea that Vicodin that I had laying around for when I would get a migraine or whatever. You know, you get them from getting your tooth pulled or whatever it is. I mean, I have had migraines in the past, so I would leave them around in case I would need it for something, having zero clue. And I'd asked you earlier that I was wondering how the mainstream community, are they being educated on this? Like, we all know now. Like a lot of FOAers, we know now.
Right.
We're in it. But what
Right.
about all those other people? And so I think that's key too.
I absolutely, and my fear is the answer is we're still not as informed as a general population as we should be. And I'd even speak more to, even our medical professional community,
Right.
we need as individual consumers of healthcare we need to be our best advocates. So we need to
Yeah.
be looking for alternative ways to treat pain, in my opinion. And part of what my plan is to be very vocal about using alternative ways to treat pain. Whether it's chiropractic care or it's physical therapy or it's acupuncture, looking for alternative ways to deal with or address pain. So talking about the pain side of it and being able to have just a comprehensive conversation around are there ways, and also using our health system, our state health system, whether it's what we pay through Medicaid, what we pay in our state employee health system, what we're paying in our workers' compensation system for the treatment of pain, making sure that we are utilizing all of the resources available to us to treat using non-opiate, non-narcotic methods, but also how do we, and I'm going to ask you a question because this is the question I have. How do we drive that comprehensive education campaign so that all Ohioans are informed about what you and I became informed about because of the crisis that we lived through?
I feel that if the medical community was on board with this, we would have had more traction on this from them already. So I'm not saying that they're not receptive, but I feel like whatever is going on with that system, it's been hard. And I've heard doctors say we were taught this, we did this, and it's hard to have doctors change those habits. So that's what I've heard. So I feel like we would get better traction on, first of all, having those insured, covered non-narcotic options available. So the first step would be getting them to where insurance will pay, whether it's Medicaid, private, both is what we would want.
Right.
So once you have that, and I know that there's already one out there, it might not be the most accessible because it may be an injection, so it's not something you can go get. But so we'll work on that.
Right.
Make sure the insurance companies are covering it, and then we do a whole huge marketing blast to our consumers of medical care to let them know that they have options, and this is an option. And so when you go to the doctor, you are informed. A lot of people don't realize they have, especially in the rehab situation.
That's right.
To know that this is your personal care and you have a say. And we've kind of lost some of that with the current system. I heard one guy said we had a big forum thing going on at our meeting, and what was some of the brokenness of it. And he said that we're not informed of our options. We're not told what Suboxone is. We're not told what Vivitrol is. We don't know about chiropractics. And even if we have to pay for it right now, families will pay.
Right.
I mean, some of them will pay for whatever is needed. So chiropractic. So you're not informed about the process. You're not, and I'm not saying like, I know a lot of providers out there, so I'm not saying, anyone in particular, but I'm saying in general, you kind of get routed into the system. This is the way it is, and I feel like it's not very, like if I got cancer tomorrow, God forbid, I'm sure there would be some discussion and consultations and all that, and we're not really having that.
Right.
And I'm trying to say to people that I work with is that you do have a say.
Absolutely.
Ask questions, and so the campaign would really revolve around empowering our consumers of medical care in this arena.
So I think for me, this sounds a little bit like my Angry Mom campaign.
Yeah.
I smile when I say that, but I am an angry mom. I'm angry at what this has done to my family and my kids, and I really want there to be a comprehensive approach, and I need to work with people like you, and this is something I am committed to doing, is to put together this comprehensive strategy around how we inform. Right. I want to make sure that we put together what could be a effective campaign around how we discuss this issue, and also my plan specifically calls for getting education. Whether every medical provider should have specific education around the incident use of opiates, but also addiction. Just understanding addiction and understanding more so than, it's your 2-hour class that's part of another class. I want comprehensive education for doctors, for example, for students in pharmacy school, for other people in the medical field, to understand, to have a better understanding of what addiction is, not only while they're going to school to begin with, but then as continuing education.
Yeah, just tell them to come to FOA for a month.
Yes.
And
they'll see it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've one of the things, the compassion fatigue that I talked about. I've wanted to find a way to create like CEUs for our doctors, nurses, anybody to really come, and they could just sit, they could participate, whatever it may be, in our weekly meeting, because I think it would almost press the reset button and let them know that we're not only fighting for the people that are overdosing and all this coming through over and over again, but we're really fighting for their families too.
That's right.
And I think it might help them remember that there's a family behind every person that keeps popping up. And I think that they're probably getting angry at these people, like, you're back here again, like, what is up? But behind that person is a family that really cares. And and so I really feel like it would help. And one thing I wanted to bring up that I don't think people think about, and you as a working woman, I'm sure knows this, or maybe you don't want to admit it, but you probably can't.
Maybe.
Is, I got a call the other day from a woman that was at work, and she had closed her door, had been closed for about 45 minutes, and she was calling for help for her son. And what this is, us families are traumatized as well.
Yeah.
And what employers are not understanding is what this does to your employee who has a loved one who's addicted. And we are distracted. We are not focused. We spend time searching the internet for numbers and where we can send them. We spend time on the phone with them. I don't know how many calls or texts you've gotten where there's always, when they're in active addiction, there is a crisis every day.
Every day.
That they expect us to handle. Now, do we have to answer everyone? No, we don't. But it's a journey for us too. And so you have these crises that are happening daily with your loved one. I mean, my daughter would threaten to come to my job. I would tell the security guards down there, if she comes, call the police. Or I would go down and I would get her money to get her away from my job. So all of these things is taking a toll on our employers, our corporations, and I say again that we are able in about 3 times of a person coming 3 times to really ease their minds, have them find peace, have them know that they're not alone, gather some tools, get some numbers to really perform better. And I feel like that's saying a lot. And so this is something that a lot of people aren't talking about, is what's happening to our workforce, because we're distracted. I mean, right?
Absolutely. And so the Ohio State University just put out a study. One of the things that it makes reference to, because it quantifies, is the overall impact of this addiction crisis. It's up to $8 billion. Now, that's, some people have misunderstood what they reported, thinking that is what it would cost us to rehabilitate or help those to get to recovery. But what it is it's the overall economic impact that takes into account what's happening in your workplace. Lost productivity, and obviously the cost of treatment and all of those things. That's all put in this number. I mean, there is a dramatic economic impact because of the addiction crisis that we're in. And my plan, I believe, because I personally understand what you have just described, because I lived through it. I've lived through the same crisis every person that has a loved one in addiction has lived through. The phone calls, the texts, the emails, the frantic feelings, having to rush
every
home
time
from
the phone
every
rings,
time the
it's
phone
like,
rings.
Is what's going on now, like completely.
Yeah, and the trauma around that feeling.
Yeah.
How long does it take for that feeling to go away?
It's a long time.
A long time. And so again, when you talk about we need to devote resources to this addiction crisis in a way that builds out treatment, which is what I'm proposing, because we're already paying the cost.
Yeah.
We're paying the cost, and we're paying it across the spectrum. And one of the most, well, not most, I've learned a lot of really important things, but just in our own family therapy and what we have been dealing with, one of our therapists said to us, what happens inside of you happens between you. And to me, that's that emotional response to the trauma that we have lived through.
Right.
As family members, but also, again, even our own kids who are in addiction or today in recovery, same thing with them.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too is like, I don't know if you've noticed, but active addiction for us has certain emotions and all kind of stuff going on with it, and recovery, as well as that is, also then comes with a whole new set of challenges for us as well, and like now how not to police and wait for the other shoe to drop, and how to keep encouraging, because there's been times where I'm encouraging and she's actually using, and it's like, are you kidding me? So but you have to keep supporting and all this stuff, and so that's too where I feel like the people with the shared lived experience are able to effectively and economically help others in this situation. So, not everybody can go to a therapist. I've heard that some therapists in these cases do and don't help. They can't access it. So I just feel like, again, I feel like the family, a lot of the focus is on what can we do for the person who's addicted, and that's one thing.
Right.
But the families, let's just not underestimate the value of the family in this whole picture, and you get it. I see that.
Absolutely, and again, understanding that, because it looks the same.
Yeah.
When you're in crisis mode, when you're in active addiction, you have all of the emotions as a parent that you just described, and then you get to the recovery side, and it does come with its whole new set of emotions and understandings. And I think that's why, I'm devoted and committed to providing resources in our schools to help our kids. Again, whatever their environment looked like, wherever they entered this addiction crisis, they have trauma in some way, and they are going to need specialists to help them deal with this. And I think we're going to have to step up and do it in our schools, because I really don't know how else we're going to get to these kids if we don't do it there. One
of the things that I'm going to really suggest to you is people are already working on this stuff, right? So I was in, we have a initiative called Community Action Overdose Team, stands for COAT. So I was in one of those meetings today. We're already discussing these things.
Right.
So as a leader, before you guys think that you have the answer, my suggestion is come to the communities and see if they've already starting working on something that's already working. Because we're putting our heart and our soul into this stuff, because we're warriors for our community. So rather than saying, okay, well, we've come up with this great idea, well, we might already have, and that's where, I don't know, you're like your team or whoever works for the governor or whatever, have them out figuring out what's already going on, and what, if it's working, how can we fund that instead of reinventing the wheel on some of these things. You know what I mean? Because like I said, we're already having these conversations on what we can do with the kids.
I 100% agree with you, which is why I know we've had a couple reporters ask very specifically, well, how are you going to spend the bond funds? And what we're saying is we are going to fund what works. And in your community what works, and what works here in Dayton or Montgomery County or the counties that you're in may look a little different than what works where I'm from in Northeast Ohio. But there are community-driven solutions, and we are not going to be prescriptive to you and say this is what we believe works. We're going to listen to you and say this is what is working on the ground, and we want to be there to support what you're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. But you know what the really cool thing is? I think the cool thing is like, you've got your life as lieutenant governor. I have no idea what that looks like, but I'm sure it's I don't know,
it's fun.
It's a lot more fun than mine.
No,
but here's the thing. So you have this completely different life than I have. I'm a graphic artist who started FOA, but yet as moms, I'll just say as moms, I don't want to say it's exactly the same, but it is. You see what I'm saying? Like all those emotions and all of those things that we've experienced as mothers completely combine. And when someone asked me, what would I tell you, like when you first started kind of coming around, what would I tell you if I had a chance to talk to you? And the first thing is I said, I was going to tell her to give me a call, because on that way you're on the same level.
Yeah.
And so that's another really cool thing about the fact that you know, and it's really kind of reassuring and comforting, you know, that you know.
Well, and I know, unfortunately, right? That's what we want to say. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't want to be this informed about this crisis, but I am. Because I've lived through it, and you're right, it is interesting. You talk about being a graphic designer. I'm a CPA. I have zero artistic skills, none, zero zip, so I couldn't even begin to understand what it is you do from a professional perspective.
Right.
But we can relate because we've been through similar or the same.
And I will say that as a graphic designer, one thing that I've noticed is we have a lot of good programs here already, like, you know, workforce and all this stuff.
Right.
And part of the problem is that they're not marketed. People don't know about them.
Yeah.
So in your bond and your money stream, make sure that you put in marketing dollars so that the people know what you've created. I mean, even to start talking on some of these other initiatives, people don't know.
Yeah.
So marketing is a huge thing. It's helped us get where we're at. And I just want to say that I'm so glad that we've been able to have this candid conversation and let the viewers know what's going on, and how passionate and compassionate I am, and how you are, and really how we can pull this together.
Thank you. Thanks. And I appreciate the comment on the marketing dollars. One of the biggest frustrations I had, probably the major frustration, at least early on, once learning that my older son had an addiction issue, was, where do you turn for help? And I think we've made some progress there, and we've got community groups like yours and others across the state that are helping to connect people with resources. Yeah. But you know, I said to people, I'm the Lieutenant Governor of Ohio. I have a vast amount of resources. Yeah. I don't know who to call.
Who am I going to call?
Well, I didn't know who to call.
And that still happens today, and I'm not really sure why.
And that
but I
needs to
get
change.
Calls every day from people. But here's the good thing, is that we are able to now, one of the things we're going to do is create a helpline. Because I'm convinced that this is not going to change, that it's your networking, it's your relationships, and you can have every number in the book, but if you have a relationship, I'm telling you, I don't think it's going to change.
I agree with you.
And that's where organizations like FOA excel, because we have those relationships, and we're able to really make a difference and get people into treatment quick and help families right away.
Well, I've really enjoyed learning what you do, having served on the first panel discussion that we had here a couple months ago, but also getting a better understanding of the work that you do. And I do know there are people like you all over the state of Ohio, and what you should expect of your government is, you know, who may be the next governor of the state of Ohio, is that we are in the community understanding and listening to not only what the challenge is, but also to the great things that are happening. And we need to support that.
Use us for information, and at the same time realize that what we're doing is valuable.
Yes.
And then lift us up.
Yep. That is ultimately the goal. And thank you. I appreciate
thank
spending
you
time with you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. The handshake's kind of like, I can have.
Gotta have a hug.
All right.
We do hugs. Right?
Yeah,
we do
that's
hugs.
what we gotta do.